I don't have the best memory, and today we're going to be talking about the books whose quotes and insights just sticked into my brain and possibly changed my life. I have some notes here, and we're going to be talking about my top 3 love and relationships books, 2 books about creativity, 1 book about health, 2 about finances, and 1 about work-life balance. Also, if you're new to this channel, I am a full-time video editor and have another YouTube channel, and so in here I just want to lay down and talk and not be worried about how many sound effects I'm adding and zoom ins. These videos are not edited to retain your attention with a bunch of things, so just multitask while you're watching this. Watch this as a podcast. Do not expect fancy editing because this is my relaxed place. Alrighty, here's my computer. The first book I'm going to be talking about is Big Magic. I've bought this book for my mom. It's one of the only books that if you actually ask me in real life about it, I can recall things and tell you about it. Is that kind of sad because I've read a lot of good books, but I'm just bad at retaining information. There are 2 main things that I love about this book. And the first one is that it really challenged my view on your work being your passion. I used to have, and maybe still have, this not correct mindset that if people aren't working on something that they're very passionate about, then they're not cool. I used to kind of look down on people who don't work on something they're very passionate about. But the author here talks about how a lot of times in creative fields, you lose your love for something when it starts paying your bills. Because when it starts paying your bills, that's when you start to have something to lose, and that's where you start to maybe have more friction and conditions and rules. For example, I made YouTube videos for 5 to 6 years on my other YouTube channel before I made a single cent. And I am the first to say that even though I still love doing it so much, now it gives me a lot more anxiety and I'm much more careful about the experimentation I do because I know that I have something to lose. That if I do something wrong and people don't like it, I could compromise the money that helps me pay my rent, or I could compromise the audience that was so hard to build. Same with musicians, same with writers. I think it's so much easier to get writer's block once you actually have to write to sustain your work. Anyways, here are some quotes I love from the book. Wisdom has nothing to do with knowledge. It has to do with freedom. When you are wise, you are free to use your own mind and run your own life. I worry that what students of the arts are often seeking in higher education is nothing more than proof of their own legitimacy. Proof that they are real creative people because their degrees say so. This is so real. Coming from an arts background, I feel like so many of my friends in creative areas could be working instead of getting themselves into student debt or spending 3 years of their life doing a BA. But the reason why they didn't start, and I'm not saying you start working and you start making money off the bat. I'm not saying you start working and you suddenly become successful. And I'm not saying you don't learn a lot in college. What I am saying is those 3 years that you spend in classes where sometimes the teachers just never even worked on the area and they're not even that useful. And if you were learning by yourself on other platforms or on internships, you would actually build a portfolio in a network of people that can help you be more successful. Recognizing that people's reactions don't belong to you is the only sane way to create. You can measure your worth by your dedication to your path, not by your successes or failures. I never promised the universe that I would be a great writer. God damn it. I just promised the universe that I would be a writer. You're not required to save the world with your creativity. Your art not only doesn't have to be original, it also doesn't have to be important. And she just goes into the concept of being playful and not losing the love for the craft because of external factors. Moving on into the second book, it's Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull and Amy Wallace. Ed Catmull was the former president of Pixar, and this book was so interesting. It's a long read, but it was not also super helpful to me. I loved hearing the backstage, how it all worked at Pixar. This book talks about how you can create a good, strong, loyal, hardworking, not burned out team, how you can give a great idea to a mediocre team or a mediocre idea to a great team, and the second option will lead you to such better results. He also talks a lot about leadership and how to basically create a healthy environment at work in a very detailed and complete way. talks about how to give constructive feedback and how they do that when they're producing the movies at Pixar. How to apply your long-term vision to your small decisions in your day-to-day. How failures are an investment in the future. Can you imagine the pressure that the people that work at these huge companies have when they start working on a new project? Because they can do a lot of A/B testing and marketing stuff, but they have no way of knowing if it's going to be successful or not, and they have really high stakes. And also how to generate ideas in healthy environments and how to push from people's creativity without doing it in a negative, bad way. And then we've got a very popular book, which you've probably already heard of, which is Steal Like an Artist. This is a super light read, and sometimes I just go back to it and read some of the quotes I highlight. It's a book that I think will warm artists and freelancers' hearts. The author says, who you marry is the most important decision you'll ever make. And marry well doesn't just mean your life partner, it also means who you do business with, who you befriend, who you choose to be around. A day job gives you money, a connection to the world, and a routine. Freedom from financial stress also means freedom in your art. If you ever find that you're the most talented person in your room, you need to find another room. I love this, which is modern art equals I could do that, yeah, but you didn't. There's so many, this gives me such the ick when I go to a museum or I'm seeing some artist's work that maybe is just very abstract, very random, and someone's like, I could have done that. Sure, but did you do it? No. Are you a successful artist? Probably not. So why are you judging someone else's work and being so mean when no one forced anyone to buy their work? And if they're rocking, let them rock. What's originality? Undetected plagiarism. Everything that needs to be said has already been said, but since no one was listening, everything must be said again. Alrighty, moving on into love and relationships books. I think throughout the past 4 years, I really found a big random passion of mine, which is relationships, like romantic relationships specifically. I love talking to my friends about like deep stuff in their relationships, and I know that relationships cannot be put into a formula. They're probably one of the most complex areas of one's life, but I think it's so interesting, especially in an era where divorce is like, what, a 50% thing? But anyways, first one is love is letting go of fear. I've always had this concept in my head, which is the way to heal people is by giving them love, like kind of like kill them with kindness. I read this book at a very hard phase of my life, and it really made me feel secure and like I was on the right path. The author says there are only two emotions. One is love and the other is fear. Love is our true reality. We should see fear as a call of help for love. This is such a powerful sentence. I think everyone who deals with a lot of rage and that is just not a pleasant person to be around, that treats others not well, I think it comes from, in every single case, it comes from a lack of someone feeling loved. And that is so sad, and that is not an excuse to tolerate bad things. But I think when someone is not being correct with us and respectful, if we look at it as, okay, this person is just living in fear, it really helps us kind of control our emotions and be more empathetic with others. Because he also says, instead of seeing others as attacking us, we can see them as fearful. We're always expressing either love or fear. Fear is a call for help and therefore a request for love. No one attacks us unless he first feels threatened and believes that through attack he can demonstrate his own strength at the expense of another's vulnerability. The next book is Attached by Amy Levin. I haven't actually finished the whole book, but I read the majority of it and then I paused it and I never went back to it, but I actually need to finish it. You've probably heard of the attachment theory. If you haven't, it basically divides people into 3 categories, I believe. And it has a lot to do with the way that you were loved as a child, majorly by your parents, and how that builds up your personality and the way that you love other people, the way you accept love, the way you deal with bad experiences. Are we very needy people that need a lot of affection? Are we those type of people that maybe pretend like they don't need affection and that they're superior to it? Are we more avoidant? And the book also goes into what healthy codependence is. I think there's a lot of couples and just relationships and friendships in general where even if no one has bad intentions, they just depend on each other in a not healthy way, or they lose their individuality. And so, but I also think that a true partnership means that we're counting on the other person. because we can count on them, and so we can take the luxury of depending on them. But it was a very messy subject in my head, and this book just made me realize like what healthy codependence really looks like. And the book also has a lot of coupled examples, like real life stories, which I think makes it much more fun to read. Okay, the next book, I'm not going to be telling you anything about it because I'm going to be doing a full video on it. It's called Why We Sleep, and it blowed my mind away. So if you're interested in learning more about sleep, read this book, but I'm going to be making a full video on it, so yeah. Then we've got a book about healthy productivity, healthy time management, healthy this book was recommended to me by a client, and I knew from the start that it was the right book to read at the stage of my life that I'm currently in. I do think this book is created for a very specific type of audience. I think a lot of people won't get the anxiety that this book describes and is trying to fix. But for the productivity freaks, the overachievers, the ones that are running multiple projects at the same time, and the ones that always feel like they're not doing enough, this book should be a mandatory read. The title itself is quite humbling because the book is called 4,000 Weeks, and if we live until the average life of a human being, which is I think 80-something years, that means that we have 4,000 weeks in our lives. He also has this bit about dating where he's like, well, this generation is so focused on the big range of possibilities we have on dating apps where we can meet so many people, and there's so much people that we can possibly match and that can be like our true soulmate, and so we cannot like settle for less than we deserve, and we need to like be on this hunt for the perfect partner, that we end up kind of creating this rat race for ourselves where we're never happy enough because there's this illusion of a possible perfect possibility because of the internet and the globalization of the world, and how we should actually, when we meet someone that we love and that treats us right and that has all these qualities, just settle down for them, and that settling in life is very important so that we actually go forward. Because if we never settle down and we always think that there's something better coming, or that we're not prepared enough to launch our business, or that we need to learn more before we start working at this job or just working on our dreams, then we never actually take action and we end up not doing anything because we're always on a search for something better. It's so funny because he also talks about how in a world with washing machines and airplanes, shouldn't we all have more time? And how the whole, I see it in my lens, the whole AI evolution and the whole like just the industries that we're living with right now are just a trap. Because if humans were actually smart, we wouldn't be burning ourselves out working 8, 10, 12-hour days. Because we actually don't need to. It's just our consumer society that traps us into thinking that we need that. I used to, when I was single, I used to like work from when I woke up to when I went to sleep. And I used to only stop working if I had somewhere to be or a social event, because there was always enough stuff to fill my full hours with. And I always felt like if I wasn't working or I wasn't doing something meaningful, then I was wasting my potential, and I was wasting and being like a brat, and I wasn't working enough for my dreams, until I started to be forced to realize, because I started feeling very burned out, obviously, that our brains are not meant to do that, and that productivity is not just about work, it's also about rest and how you rest and effectively resting. Super great book, definitely recommend. And now moving on into the last category, it's finance books. And I'm going to start with the book that I think everyone who's interested in personal finance, learning more about money, how to manage money at a small scale with your, paycheck, or at a bigger scale if you want to invest or learn about real estate or assets and liabilities. Rich Dad Poor Dad, it's a classic, you've probably heard of it, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I really, really recommend this book to anyone who is just curious to learn more about managing money and the basics. This is basically the book that should be taught in school. It's not a difficult book to understand, it's very easy, but has such strong, important, basic concepts. And just about how money makes money. Having money generates money. And so if we're smart enough with our money, even if we're not making a lot, we can start using it in ways that will help us make more and then be able to work less, which is something that I feel like people don't want you to know. The secret in life is not making millions or even hundreds of thousands. It's just how you manage it. I feel like people sometimes get too trapped into, I need to make more money, and they don't realize that if they actually are smart with their money, they save a little bit. It's not that they're like being crazy with the saving, but if they just learn a little bit about money, they can do a lot more with a lot less than they expect. The second book I want to talk about in depth here is Never Split the Difference. Now, this book was one of my most recent reads, and it is so good. It's basically written by this FBI agent that used to negotiate kidnapping situations, like real hardcore kidnapping situations. And he just goes into a lot of strategies that he learned that are super effective when you're negotiating something. And now this can work for so many areas of your life, and people don't realize how powerful negotiation skills actually are. Not just if you want a raise at your job, not if you just want to convince your mom to let you go to the disco with your friends tonight if you're 16. But so much in our lives, if we knew how to negotiate better and we were more confident and had more tools, we could go so much further with the same that we have right now. So I'm not going to go into the techniques because that would take forever, but I really recommend this book to anyone. The book is also written in a very good way where at the end of each chapter he has a summary of the key takeaways and tactics, and he also shares a lot of stories of the kidnapping things. So it's very interesting, very engaging, very knowledgeable. And last but not least, we've got one of my probably the only book I've read multiple times, which is The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. This is a super light read, super small book, and I've also offered this book to quite a few people. And it just goes into 4 very simple, so basic concepts that we should all live our lives by, but we don't. Like, I guarantee you that everyone that's watching this video doesn't do this 100% in their life. And it's not about being perfect, but sometimes I just like to read it again to refresh the head and be like, yeah, I should be doing this. The 4 concepts are being impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. But he goes into a lot of depth into that in a very easy to understand language, very light read. So yeah, this was all the books that I wanted to talk about today. I feel like this is going to be a lengthy video. Comment below if any of the books got into your Goodreads list, if you're gonna read any of these after you watch the video. I love reading. I love you guys, and I will see you next week. Bye!